Hello, folks of the interwebs. I was gonna say hello to the YouTube channel, but I am now I'm now posting these on my Instagram TV thing, IGTV as well. So I feel like it wouldn't be correct in saying "Hey YouTube," because I guess I could say "Hey YouTube" and IGTV and everywhere else that you're gonna end up watching this. So instead, just interwebs, right? We're all in the matrix, so it doesn't matter. How is everyone doing this evening? I hope well. It is Wednesday night, 7:23. As again, you can see at the top of my screen there. I am going to find out how to hide my toolbar at some point. I think it's easy. Actually, I know it's easy. I always actually forget to do it before I start recording inside of OBS. So instead, you can just see the time and watch the minutes tick by as I talk about kick and snare drums. I hope everyone's having a good day. Like I said, I had a really great day today, actually. I got to tell you, folks. I mixed a track. I think I was talking about that in the last video in the kick dissection that I was getting ready to start a mix on a record I produced. And I did that the last few days, actually, the last couple of days. And man, it's like, it was one of those tracks, it feels, everyone probably knowing this, that's watching this knows, sometimes it just comes together, sometimes things are just working. I like to think as a producer, and then as a mix engineer, that means that's good decisions in the production, right? Typically, some of my favorite productions that I've done are also some of my easiest mixes because things just sort of work. They come together. The frequencies are taken up naturally by what's in the production. And even things that I didn't produce that I just mix, when the mix just comes together and happens and the performances are tight and all the compressor needles are just they're just dancing around, like I said before. They're doing the mamba, as I said before. Oh boy. I mean, then the fun starts because then you're not as worried about trying to tighten things up and cut holes and blah, blah, blah. You're just having fun, just sneaking things in the right place. And today was one of those days. Actually, hence why I have some extra time this evening to do this video. I started this morning around probably 9 or 10, a little bit earlier. My idea working is I get in around 10 or 11. Started a little bit earlier today. Wanted to get cracking. I was very excited about the mix. I had a lot of ideas last night about it as I was prepping it. So I woke up ready to just go and get here, So anyway, welcome back to Barefoot Recording, Studio C, where I reside. My favorite place, my second home. I would say actually arguably maybe my home and the place I sleep is my second home. I don't know. That's just the thing that I've said over the years. So I hope everyone enjoyed the kick dissection video because today we are moving to the snare dissection. That's right. The snare drum dissection. It's going to be fun. I have my notes over here and I think I made pretty good notes. I got to say, I actually think I made pretty good notes here. So I'm feeling confident going into this video that we're going to cover some really good stuff. I imported some of the MIDI from the last session that I didn't get a chance to. I don't know if we'll have time to go over it. I mean, we always have time because this video can just keep going. But for sake of trying to keep everyone's sanity, watching me talk in front of an SM7 about snare drums, I'm gonna try and keep it to a generally digestible length, whatever that means. So we're back in the same session from the kick dissection. I thought, since I already did the kick in this session, I thought it would be good to do the snare dissection of the same session, mainly so that we can kind of see the relationship between the two. I figured you can watch the kick and the snare dissections back to back, and if you'd like, and kind of get a feel for how those two are interacting. And it's something that I'll also talk about today about the interaction between the kick and snare, because those two elements are up the center of the mix. As a matter of fact, some of the only elements in my mixes anyway, that stay just concrete up the middle, zero, pan zero, baby, Even my vocals are slightly panned left or right. My lead vocal may be like 5 or 6 to the left. My double may be 10 or 11 to the right. And kick and snares just stay anchored up the middle, Now, you do always have, usually in the choruses, a center guitar come in, and then obviously the bass sits up the middle as well. But really in a mix, if you think about it, there's not a whole lot of things that just stay centered. So those are your kind of like your anchorings of the song, right? The kick, snare, bass. Like I said, my lead vocal doesn't always sit right up the middle at 0, but it is close. Like I said, 5 or 6. So those are your anchoring elements in your stereo spectrum. Everything else moves, right? Everything else is left and right, hard panned, or 30 here, 60 here, or 25 there. So kick and snares are really important. So having said that, that's why I thought it would be good to use the same drum session, so we can see that interaction between the two. If you really want to hear if you want to hear a consistent hitter, you're getting ready to hear it. Like I said, Dash Hunting, baby. I know I'm giving 2 shout-outs, 2 videos in a row, but he's the drummer here. And boy, does he just give me the sauce every time I put those mics up. Thank you, my guy. So let's play again. I'm actually going to play, this is interesting because the start of this song is actually just a bunch of flams. So, Flammery McFlammerson. So it's actually a good song to kind of do some snare on because the beginning of the song is literally just snare and some kick and stuff. And then maybe I'll go into that second verse section again, that super sick beat that I had him lay down. But let's just take a listen to the beginning of the song, and let's listen to the snare before we get into all the goodies, all the good stuff, all the microphones, all the pictures, all the goodies. Just take a listen, enjoy it and intake what we're getting ready to dissect and analyze. And I had to let it play through verse 2. If you watch the kick dissection video, you knew I was going to do that because that verse 2 beat is just so sick. I was gonna stop it. I'm like, I just want to hear it. I just wanted to hear it. So snare, right? This snare drum, it's rock and roll. It's got some nice low end punch to it. It's got some nice top end sizzle. It stays just dead center. We're rocking, just blah, blah, blah the whole time. It is what I would define it as straight up pure rock and roll, baby. The flammies, even when the beat gets a little crazier in verse 2, right? The snare just stays in the middle. It is constant as the North Star. Is that a saying? I don't know. It is now. Whatever. So let's dig into it. Let's go ahead. So that was the Fanu drum print. I'm going to go and mute these out for now because we're going to be dealing with the actual snare tracks. As usual, I've made a nice track folder for us here, a snare track folder in this case. And we're going to go through and analyze each one of these microphones like we did last time. I'm going to go and turn off processing on these guys, anything that I had going. Yeah, we don't need that. Yeah. We're just gonna turn all this stuff off actually. I would use my modifier key, but this SM7 is just enough in the way where I figure I can't quite see or get to it. Anyway. Okay, so all that stuff's off, so we're gonna be listening to raw sounds now. Cool. I may as well turn this up for now as well, so it's louder as we listen. So let's go and listen to just the snare top, and then we'll get into some pictures, and I'll go through what's on it. Snare top only, unprocessed, only through the console. So that's a snare top. We can hear there's a little bit of a ring in there, actually. Probably the low end tuning. I really wanted to get some nice low end on this snare. So I have a feeling maybe it could have maybe used a little more moon gel, but in the moment I probably liked the liveliness of it. And honestly, listening back to it even like this, I don't even mind the liveliness of it. And I actually remember this session pretty clearly, and I remember hearing that ring and thinking, the snare sounds good. Let's not mess with it. Knowing that I can notch that out in the mix, right? So sometimes you make those decisions. It's like, well, do we want to tamper with this thing? I mean, the snare sounded pretty good. Drummer's comfortable with it. It's tuned well in the set, right? The toms, tom 1 and tom 2 snare, everything was feeling really nice to the key of the song. It's like, if there's a little bit of a ring, I think we leave it. And I mean, that is, and what's there is what I would classify as a little bit of a ring, right? It's not like this, oh my God, I can't even hear the snare drum. It's just, ooh. It's not that. It's just a little bit. It's a little guy. I actually have 2 snare tops, and I do that almost always nowadays. Really? Actually, I've done it for years. I almost couldn't tell you the last time I recorded a snare drum with only one top on it, with one snare mic top on it. I don't know. Anyway, let's listen to the second one. And these together. It's interesting because it's almost like where he's hitting that snare brings the ring out. If you notice that at the beginning, it's not really there as much, the ring, and then he kind of starts hitting it in a certain part of the snare, and then the ring is there a little bit. So that's something that also may have played in a part of my decision in saying, well, it's not always there. When he hits in that spot, I'll get it out. If he doesn't hit it in that spot, which obviously he ended up doing that's fine, then I'll take it out. So let's go ahead and take a look at the session pictures here, preview. Okay, so here's the preview. We had up a Black Beauty, one of my favorite snares, specifically the one here at Barefoot I've become quite fond of over the years. It's probably just that it's been played to shit. Just everyone's played it, and it just sounds like a drum. It sounds like a rock and roll snare. Somebody that's that's been played a bunch. You can see here, I typically tape these together and only use one mic stand so that the phase stays exact between both microphones. Putting 2 snare tops on 2 different stands and then getting them to be on the snare at the same time in the same spot is, one, going to be cumbersome for the drummer because of just it generally having more mic stands in his way. 2, you're really just fighting losing battle because one of those mic stands is going to move, and then your phase is going to be off, and then you have a real problem because then you're probably going to end up only being able to use one, and the whole exercise of doing this is to obviously be able to use both with different characters. Speaking of characters, let's talk about that. So I have an M201 on the top and a Josephson C42. For some reason, Josephson, I always have to think about before I say it. Like, there's words you have to, think about before you say, right? Kind of like there's words you have to think about before I spell it, like restaurant. I'm like, I know how to say it, obviously, but then when I go to spell it, I'm like, wait, think about it, and then spell it. Same thing with Josephson. When I say it, I'm like, okay, wait. Okay, say it. Anyway, M201 and C42, again, method to the mayhem. Oh, if you watch the Kick Dissection video, I was talking about that was a band in the early 2000s with Tommy Lee, and I said I was going to listen to it. I did, and I remember that I don't like it. Doesn't mean that it's bad. I didn't like it. I remembered, oh yeah, I didn't like this. I think the single I did like when it first came out, but the record was not my cup of tea. All right, so anyway, you can see here, pretty general position. I mean, nothing special here about the positioning of it. Just I moved it around until it sounded good. I wish there was more science and more magic I could tell you about that, but there's not. Take the microphones together and put them at the spot where it sounded good. You can see here I've taped it and put a bunch of Moonjos on it, so there is a bunch of dampening going on. You can see these guys. I don't know if you can see them or not. These are called, well, I call them butterfly tape, where they kind of look like butterfly wings. 1, 2, I have a couple of them, and it looks like I taped the ring or the rim up there for one reason or another, maybe because of the rim shots, and then there's 2 Moonjos on here as well. So we can kind of get a feel for, I was really dampening it because I wanted that really dead rock and roll, just upfront thump, right? I mean, if nothing proves it, you can just kind of look at how much dampening I'm doing and how, I want to say close. I mean, that's probably not as close. This picture doesn't do a great job. It's probably showing the distance, but whatever. So I really wanted a big rock and roll thump out of it, and we got it. Now, here's the next thing I'm going to talk about is the microphone choices and why. Well, M201, to me, it's a souped up 57, right? If you look at the EQ chart of what an M201 does, it's why I like it on guitars as well. Because anywhere I would use a 57, I would use a 201 because it kind of is just a better sounding 201 to me. I don't know. It's hypercardioid too, remember. So that's a big thing on in both those applications, on a snare drum and on a guitar cabinet. The hypercardioid, obviously by the name, super focuses on the sound. Why is it good here? Well, one, because like I said, it sounds good. But two, it's really great at other sound rejection. I mean, it is hyper. I did it. I knew it. I actually had a note here. Don't do that. Don't say hyper like as a joke. But I can't help myself. What can I say? It's hyper focused on the sound source, right? So obviously, this is sitting literally in the middle of a drum set that has someone bashing with all their might around it. How do you get that out of it? Well, I mean, there's a few ways. Obviously, later on, we're going to use a transit master again. There's also the gating technique. And another one is, for me, you put the microphone in the right dang place and you pick up the right dang microphone. Hypercardio is going to help you with that. It's going to get excellent hi-hat rejection. It's going to get excellent tom rejection. In general, it's going to get good cymbal rejection. Because again, whatever you point that thing to is really what it's focused on. Now, it's got really good mid-range attack. It's able to pick up very good low end. Again, I'm not talking about like a D112 or a U67 or anything like that, but it is able to pick up pretty decent low end, especially for a pencil mic. So the Josephson is a bit different in the sense of it. I feel like it's more top endy. It's a little bit more exciting. It's going to be more focused in that. I mean, in this application, more focused from the 4 to 10K range rather than M201. I'm going to EQ a little bit more 8K in there, but it's not naturally focused in that range. It's more focused more in the I'm going to say like 1 to 4K range, right? So knowing that now, that's what I use. Like, listen back to the M201 and the C42. You can hear how those are really working together, right? Those two are doing completely different things, really. They're not doing. They're on the same sound source, but they are completely different sounds. And I'm going to blend those two together. It looks like in this one I favored the 201. Not a huge surprise because, like I said, I was going for more of a thumpy, low indie rock snare thing. So I was peppering the C42 in for a little bit extra sizzle on top end excitement. We can see how taping those together probably did us nice. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously you can't really get better phase than that because they're literally taped together. The capsules are actually just right next to each other. So that's tight. And you can kind of hear this again. You can really see how I've EQ'd them. Now, this is coming in from the console, so we haven't turned on anything yet. You can really hear how I've EQ'd those coming into the console, how they're very complementive of one another. It's almost like you hear them both together, and then when you take one away, you're like, oh, it's just not as cool anymore. And I think I had that experience many years ago, which is why I kind of always do 2 snare mics. As a matter of fact, lately I've been doing this. This isn't one I did it on, obviously, but I've been doing an M201 and a D112 in the snare for like just incredible rock juju. Just like, okay, I want this snare to thump. I've been taping a D112 and M201 together for a snare top, and man, it sounds sick. Hey, you want to hear something really cool? Why don't we flip the phase on one of these and hear something go completely 180 out of phase? Watch this. So if you're ever wondering what an out of phase snare drum sounds like, there you have it. You can also hear the rejection. I mean, even look at the waveforms. I mean, the rejection on both these mics actually are pretty incredible. I mean, even in here, this is, again, without transient masters. There's cymbals in there for sure, because like I said, he's literally bashing in the middle of the set, but it's pretty obvious what it's focused on. And then once we turn on the transient master, or if you have a gate, it's going to be, I mean, game over. I mean, it's focused, right? So, and also I want to point out, the 201 is on the side, more on the side of where the hi-hat was. So in other words, the hi-hat's over here. I mean, obviously, we're talking minuscule decisions here because they're taped together. But as I keep saying on this channel, every little bit counts. They all add up to be something big. Putting the 201 where its bass is right behind the hi-hat, and then taping the C42 on the right side of it so that its bass is a little bit off the hi-hat is just smart. That's just good etiquette, because now the hypercardioid is going to cancel out more of the hi-hat. And this guy, even though it's by the hi-hat, it's still going to pick some hi-hat up, but it's further away from the hi-hat at its base. So there is, again, method to the mayhem here. You know, it's not all just plop stuff in by accident. These are all decisions that you're making throughout the process to try and focus your snare drum or whatever instrument you're miking. So let's go ahead and go through the snare top and go through what I did on the EQ. I noticed some interesting stuff as I opened it up to flip the face. Okay, so, actually, you know, real fast, that's right. I didn't put the console pictures in here this time because that was a bust last time. Like, those pictures of the console just weren't really that good, if I'm being honest. Like, if they're just flash low blown out, I just didn't do a very good job of taking those pictures from the session. So, sorry about that. I also, at the time, didn't know I was going to be doing this video, so in my defense, had I known that, I would have done better documentation of that day. But I did do this, and you can kind of see snare top. Looks like I am doing 10 dBs of gain reduction. Again, transformer in, high crossover on the transformer, which is, again, you know, I always do that. And yeah, so that's all good stuff. I'm driving it pretty hard. The shadow's kind of hard to tell, but I mean, I'm driving it pretty hard. I mean, you know, that microphone's impedance reacts really well with high transient sound sources anyway, so I'm probably not having to go nuts on it. But, you know, I'm driving it a decent amount. The C42, I'm not driving that much at all, actually. You can see I'm actually pretty much... what am I doing here? Yeah. I'm not really driving that hard. I mean, I have 10 dBs of gain reduction again, but not super hard. Again, the impedance levels of these microphones react really well with the high transient, high volume of the snare drum. So another reason why they're some of my first choices. So back over here to the EQ of the snare in the box. Now, I did look through some notes though from that session, like some just scratch sheets that I've written down. I didn't put them in here because I don't know how accurate they were, but I said that in just on my scratch sheets, I said I was boosting on the M201. Hold on, let me get my notes over here. On the M201, I was boosting 8K as a bell by about 2.5, 3 dBs. It looked like I said 2-3, so somewhere between there. And I was high passing at 100 and boosting at 220-ish, 220 it says, by a couple dBs as well. So that was the EQ coming into the snare top one, the M201. And then in the box here, I have this EQ. So let's play it and then I'll bypass it. Actually, let's go to this. Let's go over here. This is a better section. Okay, so I can see I'm doing a high show for the high Q at 8.5, just a couple and a half dBs, just enough to add some excitement to the M201. Again, the C42 is really where I'm getting that from, right? So I'm not as worried about that on the M201 because I feel like I've already boosted the C42 quite a bit coming in. I am boosting more 200 on the M201 to get more of that thump out of it. 2.5 dBs at 200. And then I'm dipping at 275, 4.5, less than that. I have a feeling that's when I started to try and get the ring out, but it looks like I've gone further with the one bands here. But let's just take a listen. Yeah, so it sounds like, or it looks like that's where I kind of started to identify where that problem was going to be. And let's see here. Oh, turn the Transit Master on too. Let's listen to that. Oh, interesting. See, okay. See, again, this is why I don't look at these sessions beforehand. Is because I don't want to be Mr. Cool Guy, like, oh yeah, check out what I did in the Transit Master. Like, yeah, totally so smart. I don't look at these sessions beforehand because I like to be surprised with you. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember this now. When I was mixing this, I used the sustain to help cut out the post sort of hit where that ring's coming from. I forgot about that. So another application of this Transit Master that really worked great. Let's hear that again. There's still a little ring in there, and that's why I probably put the Q1 here in a second, the one band. But man, listen to how that is focusing that snare. That's a great example of the Transit Master. If you don't have headphones on or something, pause it right now, rewind it 30 seconds, and listen to that Transit Master being turned on and off with headphones. That's some pretty dope stuff. That's sick. Q1, what did I do here? Looks like, yep, 230. I bet I identified the problem. Let's go ahead and, that was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do this. And I'm going to boost the gain up on it this time so we can hear the problem, and then I'll boost it back down. Whammo blammo. That's what you call search and destroy, where you just turn that thing up. And you find where the problem is. You know, I felt as if the center at 230 on the M201 was the problem, so I dipped that out. I probably could even dip that a little bit more, but again, there's a lot of snare information here, so not a huge surprise that I kind of went, down 6.5 dBs. Man, that's getting it out. You heard the before and after. So let's go to the C42. Turn the Transit Master on. Yo, that thing is dope. Like, I know it's dumb for me to say that, but like, I used to have a couple of Transient Designer outboard pieces, and I liked them, but it used to piss me off that I only had 2 of them, because I'm like, okay, well, now I need to pick, what to put these on, and it's like, this is example A right here. Given I would have to, what I ended up doing was printing through them, so in other words, I would patch it in and print the sound and then use those on all of them, but man, that plugin is tight. I don't know what Native Instruments charge for that, but they could charge me $500 for it, and I would say, yeah, okay, it's fine. I'll pay it. Let's see what okay. I'm not doing as much work on this snare. Not a huge surprise. I'm actually dipping at 235, which is probably, again, where I felt as if, or not again, that definitely is because I already kind of identified a 230-ish being the issue. So let's hear it on here. Yeah, so I got it out there. Then went to the Q1 and took out 230 again, same thing. So basically, I identified the ring in the snare drum at being around 230-ish in that vein. The Q is pretty thin, but it's wide enough where we're getting a little bit of dip at 250 and a little bit dip around 200 as well. So, somewhere between 2 and 250, I'm kind of just notching it out. Very cool. Let's hear those two together now with those things on. That's a tight snare. Very, very defined. Super defined. It's got some really nice rock and roll low end. It's got some really nice top end, happy Sisu stuff going on. Each of those microphones is playing their role. And, you're going to hear me, if you watch these YouTube videos or IGTV videos or whatever, you're going to hear me say this, I'm going to become just a broken record. Because I say it for every instrument that you put a microphone on and that you produce. What you pick is so damn important because it needs to serve the sound that you're recording. I don't care if it's an SM7B, an SM57, or a super expensive U87. It doesn't matter. It's got to be the right choice. There's a quick story, and then I promise we'll move on. But I once mixed a track where the engineer used a 251, a Telefunken 251. I don't know if anyone knows a microphone on here. It's really beautiful microphone. I want to say it's upwards of $10,000 or $12,000 probably. Typically used on vocals, acoustic guitars, strings. It's a very, very detailed microphone, and he used it on this guitar amp that was just distorted and all crazy, and it sounded not good. It didn't sound good. Just because something's expensive and cool doesn't mean it's going to sound good on everything. That was the wrong choice. It was probably like, oh, well, this is so expensive, this is going to sound good on everything. No, he would have been better off putting an SM57 or an SM7 that's $300 on the cabinet and calling it a day. So, again, pick out the right thing. Test them out. Make notes. These choices weren't made. I mean, it's funny. I'm going through these. I'm going to say quickly, which is kind of oxymoronic because I've spent 20 minutes talking about snare tops. But I'm going through this quickly. On the day that I'm doing this recording, I typically set up the night before and make notes. I hit things in the room and record it, come in the room and listen. I mean, into the control room and listen, switch things out. Then on the day of, I get the drummer to set up, get his things feeling good. He hits things, I change things out. Whether it be microphones, the actual instrument itself, different snare, different tom, whatever. These are not things that I do quickly. I don't think I do anything quickly in this vein, which is why you're at this channel and spending an hour watching kick and snare dissections. I appreciate it, by the way. You guys are all amazing. But again, those two together sound really good. Let me go through and mute one of these out, and you can, again, hear what I was talking about, how like, oh man, it's really tight that these both work together. They're better together. What can you say, They're better together. Cool. So that's a snare top. I mean, I'm happy with that. Why don't we take a moment, take a deep breath as I do. I do this to myself during the day as well when I'm in the middle of 10,000 things and getting sounds. I take a moment and take a deep breath and remember what I'm doing, and I listen to the sound source that I've gotten, and I appreciate it for what it is. And then I move on to the next thing. And the next thing in this case is going to be a snare bottom mic. Objectively, my least favorite microphone on the set because, I mean, it's in this snare blend, it's down 21, which sounds absolutely insane, I know. But it's doing something, I promise. And the only thing worse than having a snare bottom mic is not having it, I always say, because when you don't have it, you really miss some of that sizzle. You miss some of the kick drum coming through it. It's just a little magic microphone that there's a reason why that little guy sits below the snare drum and has for as long as I've seen videos of people recording rock bands, It's meant to be there. And really quickly, I'm going to turn everything on, and then we'll go through these. And then I'm going to listen to the snare with the bottom mic and then without it. I mean, just that little bit of it, it's like, you hear it, give it to me, baby, you hear it, when it's not there, you hear it. And you wanna not, you wanna be like, I'll save a channel, I could do that, I could do some other cool room mic with that channel or something like that. Nope. You need it. And it's easy. So I actually also used an M201 for the bottom as well. I just like how they sound. I don't know. I mean, if I were to use a 57 on the top, I would probably use a 57 on the bottom. I kind of like to match those, you know? I don't know why. I mean, not that I always do, but I do. If I have the opportunity to match top and bottom, I will do that. I think that it makes it a little bit easier to kind of carve things out and makes the snare feel a little bit more together or married or whatever you want to call it. So anyway, yeah. M2 on the bottom. Not going to go super in detail about this because it literally sounds like a bottom snare mic. I'm cutting at 300, not a huge surprise. Just to get all the nastiness that may be out. And then the Transit Master. Again, just reining that in, reining some of the more sustainy, bottomy stuff that's going on, just kind of reining it in a little bit so that it's really, again, focused. You can hear it in there again. It's important. Cut at 300 on the console. I can almost guarantee you that I high passed it at 200 because that's kind of what I always do on bottom snare mics. Coming into Pro Tools, you know. So that, my friends, is snare top 1, snare top 2, and the bottom. Again, I also want to highlight the hypercardioid factor of the bottom mic, being the M201, meaning using a hypercardioid on the bottom as well. Again, it's going to limit the amount of bleed that we get into that microphone. This is by this guy's feet, right? So it's, I mean, for that matter, I mean, here, we take a look at it again. I mean, you know, you can't really get something more in the middle of the set. As if the snare top wasn't already in the middle of the set. The snare bottom is literally like, while it's further away from the cymbals, it's by the kick drum, it's by the hi-hat, the tom's right above it over here somewhere. You know, it's just in the middle of everything. So hypercardioid doesn't have to be an M201. There's a lot of hypercardioid microphones out there. You might want to look into getting one or 2 or 6, like me, whatever. But in general, I think hypercardioids are great for snare top and bottoms. I also did use a distressor on the snare top 1. So on the M201, I had a distressor going. I mean, I hit him pretty hard. The thing is with Dash or any good drummer, like they're going to be hitting it pretty consistently. So I'm not using it for the purposes of evening the player out. I'm using it at that point for actual vibe and just getting more crush out of that microphone. So, you know, if I had 4 distressors, I would put them on kick in, kick out, snare top, snare top 2. I didn't. I had 2 in the B room, so I picked kick in and snare top 1 because I knew I was going to kind of favor in this session as we've gone through in the kick dissection. I favored the D112 for some of the attacky stuff, and I knew on the snare top I was going to probably end up favoring the M201 because it had more of the thumpier rock and roll low endy stuff, you know. Okay, so I'm going to take a drink of water, and then we're going to talk about some of the samples that I used in here, because again, some people call it cheating. I just call it fun, and I like how it sounds. But we're going to go over some of the sample stuff that I threw in this session. Oh, ASMR again, right? Okay, so I threw in a SMC, Snare MC sample, which we went over in my kick dissection video. Anytime you see me label something MC, it means that it's from my good friend Mark O'Connell, one of the friggin' best drummers I've ever seen and recorded and produced and mixed and the whole deal. The dude's a beast. Go follow him on his social medias. I think it's at Mark O'Connell TBS, M O'Connell TBS. Look him up. He's a incredible drummer. Anyway, I threw his sample in here from the sessions that him and I did a few years back. I took one shots of his set because I love the snare, because I love the set so much that we got. Next, listen to that sample real fast. This is without EQ or any Transit Master on there. So no surprise why I use that. I mean, that's, if you want to hear a thumpy snare drum, I mean, that, that's even, I mean, that's pretty thumpy, Whatever processing I did on that was really fitting for the song. Because again, Marco Cano was a rock drummer, and this song is a rock song. And I wanted a little extra rock and roll zhuzh on it. So I added his in underneath the snare that I recorded. Let's see, what do I got here? I have, oh, interesting. Okay. I actually cut out some 250. We'll listen to that in a second. We'd be willing to bet that it was getting in the way of the 201. So again, this is why I when I make samples, I keep them pretty clean as far as EQ and compression. Like I pretty much just blend the mics together and sum them down into a sample, because I would never print a sample cutting 250 and boosting 8K like this. Because if it's for sample purposes, I don't know what the session that I'm going to throw it in needs, right? I said that during the kick dissection. I think it's important to note that here. I don't know what this song was going to need 3 years ago when I made this sample. So I just make a generally neutral sounding snare sample that I like. Again, this has some great low end to it, low end punch. That's great. And let's listen to it with the EQ and the transient master on there. Damn. That's I forgot how much I like that sample, actually. It sounds like I might have put a wallet on the snare drum when I did that. Those sessions are well documented, so I could go back in my notes. I may do that just for fun tonight when I get home, because that is a tight sounding snare. Dude, Mark, props, wherever you're at, homie. We did good on that. So I boosted some 8K here. By 4 dB is actually quite a bit 8K. They make it more exciting in the top end, a little more sizzy. Because you actually heard, if you turn this off, it's a little dull, actually. Again, not in a bad way. It sounds like a snare drum, but this definitely adds some excitement. For sure. And then let's listen to this real fast. Yeah, so I probably was trying to get that out of the way of the 201. Because, again, when I'm using samples, while I like them, they're not my favorited sound source. The favorited sound source is going to be the recorded material, especially when I recorded the material. When I recorded and produced the material, I'm going to lean on my microphones that I set up for that session, because they've been curated for that song and that session. So I didn't want this MC sample to get in the way of the 201, because the 201 was my favorite at low end. So yeah, that's exactly why I did that move there on that sample in this session. Okay, so I then added I talked about this in the kick dissection video, but if you didn't see that, then I'll explain it really quickly again. I recorded these drums in the Barefoot B room. I love the B room, no slight on ya, but I do like some of the stuff in the A room. And I felt as though when I mixed this, I remember thinking that I missed some of the A room magic that I figured I get. These aren't like roomy snares where you're going to hear the A-room, but it's more just like the gear that I have in there, the processing opportunities I have in there, some of the outboard gear, things like that is what I missed, not as much the room sound. But I did add some, let's see, this is the A-room attack samples. I use this one a lot, the sample that I made. And again, for people just joining the drum dissection videos, any samples I use, I make. They're my samples. Not to be high and mighty about it. Not saying I won't use one of my friends' samples, something that gives one to me. I personally feel as if I'm going to use a drum sample, it's going to be my own, right? I've recorded drums now and produced drums for 15 years. I definitely have a catalog of sounds I've gotten that if I want to get, if I need to pepper something in, it should be mine. I'm not going to lift it off somebody else, Not saying that's wrong to do. I'm just saying for me personally, that's what I use, are my samples. So this is A-room attack. That's a fun sample because I'm not even using that much of it, actually. That's a fun sample because it's just so, like, cranked to high heaven. Like, the top end's just cranked. I mean, everything's cranked about the attack. What did I do on? I probably didn't do a whole lot. Yeah, I just, it looks like the sample was out of phase. Definitely, was this one out of phase? That was in phase. Always, if you're adding samples to your drums, Hopefully your drums are good, or have good phase to begin with. I'm just going to assume that. But if you're adding samples, don't undo your work and just throw samples in there, and then they're out of phase, and you're wondering why your drum set sounds worse with samples, and all of a sudden, you know, it's okay to use samples. We all do it, but do it right. Also, really quickly, I want to make note again, just like the kick, I went through every one of these snare samples or snare hits in the song, and I changed the velocity of every hit to match what the drummer was hitting, just like in the kick. The snare had a little bit less velocity because generally in this song, he's just kind of hitting the snare super hard. The kick drum had a lot of velocity changes because it was very dynamic, his right foot in this case. But same thing, snare drum. I went through every hit of this song and changed the velocity so it felt as if it was being played by Dash. Right? It was at least getting to the core of what he was doing. I wasn't trying to just put a sample in, just hit it hard the whole time. Blah, 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 blah. No. I went through every sample and set a velocity for it, okay? Really important. So the transient master on this one's important because I know this one has a bit of a sustain on it that I'm not always a fan of. And it's my sample, but it just, it's got some really gnarly top and sustain. So I'm choking that pretty hard. I'm only peppering, it's down 19, so I'm using a very little bit of it. I'm only using that for extra top-end sauce, extra top-end fun stuff, you know? Probably just to play off of the C42. Again, when you look at my samples, if I've used samples in the session, I don't always use samples in the session, but if I used samples in the session, typically it's to exaggerate something that I've already started to do on the set, right? So in other words, that the MC sample was exaggerating the snare top one's low end, and the A room attack sample is exaggerating the top two's top end boost, right? So it's not like I'm just getting these out of the clear blue sky. Like I've made a decision why this belongs in the session. Take a drink of water. Oh, my notes turned off. That's bad. If you watch this channel, you know if my notes turned off, things go off the rails. They already go off the rails quickly. But if I don't have notes, it's a scene, man. They're back. Oh my God, we're safe. Don't worry, I'm not going to start talking about the Super Bowl again. But no, I'm not going to. I almost did because this Sunday is the first Sunday without football in like 6 months, and it's also Valentine's Day, but it's first Super Bowl. I'm sorry, the first Sunday without football. It's a little. It's sad. I'm just gonna say it. It's sad. A little mopey. Okay, so A room attack sampled, pretty dope, and it's adding some nice crispness to the snare top to the C42. A room low. Now this one actually, I know what sample this is because I use this one. If I'm doing drum sampling, I like this one a lot. We'll just listen to the sample real quick. This is a snare that I tuned down in the A room at some point, like super low, and got it super controlled. I remember just putting like tons of butterfly tape and moon gel on it, because I wanted to make a sample that sounded, well, bass like that, but just had like stupid low end punch. Like you couldn't really play that couldn't. It would be very difficult to play that snare drum in a sort of a set because it would be so low and tuned down that it would interact with the other drums in probably like not a great way. It would probably sound really strange, and it may even have trouble poking out of the mix of the drum itself because it's so low. So that's why I did it as a sample, because I wanted one that was just like stupid, like just super low and low endy. It was really only focused on that. So that's what I did. This is... Oh, there we go. Okay. Also flip the phase in the sky. I'm going to turn my AC off here. So, excuse me 1 second. She was blowing right on me. It was getting a little chilly. Boosting 200 at 2.5 dBs. Yeah, why not? If it's going to be a low-end sample, let's make it a low-end sample, people. Like, let's not be apologetic about it. Let's fucking do it, you know? By the way, I did find out that I can curse on this channel. I guess... I just have to mark it as not made for kids, which I don't really think this channel. I mean, it's talking about kicks and snares. I don't think it's a kids channel anyway, so I think it's okay. But anyway, yeah, it's like typically I don't do things I mean, even when I'm putting up snare mics and kick mics, I'm not doing anything like, oh, this is sort of halfway there. It's like, yeah, this is what it's doing, you know? So yeah, this sample that I used, it is for low end. So I'm going to boost. I mean, I didn't boost a ton of low end because it already, you know, you heard it. I mean, it's got a natural amount of low end already. And then I probably choked it pretty hard too to get it out of the way. Yeah, so let's listen. Yeah, so I mean, that is, I mean, that's adding a lot of low end to the snare. I can tell you that right now. So let's go ahead and listen to all of these together. And let me show you actually real quick the phase thing too, just so you can see. I probably moved, let's see, yeah, so I'll up the waveform here. Yeah, so it looks like I probably just simply did it with the top, and these guys are in, and then these guys are obviously out. I probably just moved these to be exactly 180 out. If it was, meaning in other words, if it was like, you know, here or something, I probably just shifted it so it was 180 out, and then so that I could flip the face, right? Because I mean, it's gonna be rare that a sample is either all the way in or all the way out. I kind of just see where it's closer. If it's closer to being out, then I'll move it to be out and then flip the phase 180. If it's closer to be in, then I'll just move it in. You just have to kind of see. So yeah, so let's listen to all these together, and then we'll get into a couple of little fun treats that I did, or that I do a lot. My snare hallway mic and my snare verb that I've printed, and we'll get into some of those fun little tricks. But let's listen to this snare drum. Just the microphones with the samples attached. Okay, now that's without processing. Now, let's go ahead and turn on some processing on the bus. So, just like on my kick, I have a snare bus 20, and then that is then going to my drum bus, which eventually gets kicked out to outboard gear. The drum bus gets printed 3 times through a SSL G-Comp, through a API 2500 for a crush, and through the Unfairchild. And then those are then blended together and EQ'd some more, and then that's a whole other thing. Like I said, I probably could just do a half an hour episode on that at some point, and I probably will. If you want me to, then let me know. If you're like, dude, enough with the drums, like you gotta get off the drums, like what's up? That's okay too. Totally get it. But anyway, so all of my snare mics are being sent to bus 20, where then I'm doing processing here. We'll get into why the hallway and the snare verb are not being sent to the snare bus. It's pretty obvious, but we'll get into it later. But anyway, the snare, the direct sources are all being sent to the bus here, where we're doing some more EQing. And as if you didn't already know that I want a low end out of the snare, well, I'll be damned. Look at that. We're on the bus. I'm boosting 200 by 2 more dBs. And then I'm boosting some 8.5 at 2.5 dBs as well. So just, again, you know, I said in the kick, tweaking, focusing, all these little moves now start to make a big difference, right? I've already gotten the right microphones. I've picked the right takes. I've produced the right part. I've edited everything together. I've done my console equalization. I've done my outboard compression coming in. Now all these tweaks, right? Yeah, okay, it's only 2 more dBs at 200 on the bus. Yeah, it's only 2.5 more dBs at 8.5 on the bus. But got to remember, I'm already boosting 200 at 2.5 dBs here, and I'm boosting 2.5 at 8K on a high shelf. And then here I'm, well, cutting there. Okay, fair enough. I'm boosting 4 dBs of 8K here. I'm not doing anything on the attack, and then I'm boosting 2 dBs of 200, or I'm sorry, 2.5 dBs of 200 on this guy. So by this time now we're adding a little more low end, a little more top end. It all starts to make a difference, you know. Again, stage equalization. There's no spot where I'm just boosting. I'm just gonna boost 7.5 decibels at 200 on this one thing and then move on with my life. No, it's little bits at a time. You know, making those small decisions add up to something big, right? So we have that EQ. Guys, I'm going to turn my AC on. I'm being very, I can't make my mind up. Am I hot? Am I warm? I don't know. Apparently I'm warm. Okay, so then my notch EQ, okay, there we go. Let's listen to that actually. So you can hear, like I always say, just because you're cutting it on the channels doesn't mean when everything's being summed together that we don't still have little remnants of it. And this is a great example of it, folks. I've been cutting friggin' 230 to 250, like, for an hour. Because more than likely, the snare drum probably took me an hour or so to do, to EQ and compress and get it in place. And still, at the last stage, I'm like, man, there's still some dang 215, 225 in there. It's ringy. So what do? Blam. Notch it out on the bus. You have to. You have to check these things. You have to be details. It's all about the details. You can't let things go. So let me hear that again without it. So it's definitely there. So I heard that. So then we put it back on. And no longer does it exist, or it's very minuscule at that point, And then in our compressor, let's see, am I hitting it hard? Probably not. No, and I'll tell you why I'm not hitting it hard. I'm hitting it a little bit just to keep it in place. Again, anchoring it in the center of the mix, keeping it in place. But I'm not hitting it super hard because this S bus, again, is going to my drum bus. And then that drum bus, again, is being sent out to 3 separate compressors that are being printed. So if I squash a snare here, even 4 or 5 dBs, by the time it hits the SSL, the API, and the Unfairchild, basically what you have is no snare drum left. It's just a bunch of... There's just nothing there anymore, So I typically on the bus, I'm not hitting it. Again, I am compressing it. I'm compressing the S-Top 1, the M201 to tape through the distressor bit, but not a whole lot. And then none of these are really being compressed yet until we get to this stage on the bus. Again, I went over this in the kick dissection. I hope everyone watching this, watch the kick dissection because I feel like these two things are going hand in hand. You can kind of see how these are supporting one another. Even EQ-wise, you can kind of see like the kick drum kind of cut a hole for the snare drum, and the snare is kind of cutting a hole for that kick. They're going to be, as a matter of fact, maybe later I'll even play the kick and snare, just the kick and snare together, so you can hear how they're playing off each other, how there's holes cut for each of them. So anyway, I'm not compressing into the channels, right? I'm going to quickly say it because I already said in the kick dissection. If I have a bunch of R compressors in the box hitting these different channels and they're hitting at slightly different times, the phase gets thrown off, right? Everything's not moving together. Everything's not dancing together. I want it to be mamboing together, okay? I want to be dancing. I want them all to be doing that together. If they're even slightly off here and there, then what happens? The picture gets just slightly blurry. And boy, is that a bummer. Because, as I said in the kick dissection video, if it's blurry now, well, what's going to happen, folks, good folks of the interwebs, what's going to happen when I compress that blurry image through my outboard gear? And then these drum stems, I'm pointing to the screen like you guys can, these drum stems then get sent out to my mix bus, right? Everything just keeps getting magnified and amplified. So if we have a blurry signal here, it's not going to look it's not going to sound good later, guys. It's going to sound worse and worse and worse. So if we're having compressors working all at different times on these snare drums, it's going to be blurry. So instead, I do all my EQ moves, my gating, trans-designing, etc., sum them all together to the bus, and then compress that as one signal together. And again, that gets sent to my drum bus, which gets sent out to my outboard processing, which was the thing we listened to at the beginning of this video and which we'll listen to at the end of it too. Okay, so how are you feeling? This channel is so cool to me. It's fun for me, honestly. I hope it's fun for everybody watching, but like the fact that I get to talk about a snare drum for an hour is like very tight to me. Like it's tight. Like it's fun, especially after having mixed on my own all day today, where I was kind of making these decisions and these moves in my head by myself in solitude, and then being able to come on here and just like podcast-esque, just blurt all this stuff out. It's tight. So thanks guys for watching. Man, I gotta tell you too, real fast. The first week this channel's been up, I got like 100 subscriptions. Those are very small numbers, obviously, compared to other stuff on YouTube, but I'm not trying to be famous on YouTube. I don't care. But 100 subs in a week, just thanks, guys. That's cool. It showed me like, oh, cool, I should keep doing these videos. There's people that are watching them. Whether you're enjoying them or not, I don't know. Leave me a comment. Let me know. But at least you're watching them. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I was really flattered by that. I was very, very humbled. So thanks. Okay, so let's go through some fun stuff here. S hallway. What is this? Hallway? Well, it's exactly what it says, which is, in this mix, I do this a lot, actually, here at Barefoot, because there's something about, if you've ever been to Barefoot, and I don't know how many people watching this have been, if you ever have been to Barefoot, the hallways and the lounge here just are acoustically fun. They're just a treat. They really are. They're very echoey, The rooms here are super dead and tight, but the hallways, for one reason or another, they're very echoey. So, I've done a thing where, I know you can't see my speakers because the camera's pointing out, but behind this are my monitors, my Focal Trio 6B, shout out Focal, my faves, what's up? Where I put a microphone out in the hallway, or actually two of them in this case. I did a stereo pair out in the hallway and opened the door and then put earplugs in and cranked my monitors and then recorded the source through my monitors down in the hallway. And I've done that. I'll be honest, once I found this trick here at Barefoot, I actually do it pretty much in every snare drum in my mixes nowadays. Even if I don't even use a lot of it, it's just fun. Like, I'm not even using a ton of it here. I'm using down 21. But wait until you hear what it does. It is so sick. First of all, let's solo it out. So that's this signal. Let me go. That's this signal. But stereo mic coming down the hallway. Crank through these monitors coming down the hallway. I already know I do this move on almost every time I do this because I have found a 600 hertz buildup in the hallway that whenever I do this is just there. So you can hear. So again, I hope you guys are watching some of these episodes on headphones or monitor or something, because what I just did there, to me, night and day. Scooping out 4.5, 5 dBs of 600 out of this sample, you're like, oh, cool. It just clears it up. All of a sudden, there's all this space in the sample, So this is a fun thing I do. I can't express how much fun I have doing this every time I do it. I don't know. I don't know why. It's just fun for me. It's like, I always do it at night after everyone leaves. Having said that, during COVID, I've basically been able to do it kind of whenever. But usually at night after everyone leaves, I mic up the hallway and I just have fun just blasting snare drums out of my monitors down the hallway. Let's listen to this with the snare drum. Holy shit. I mean, if that's not a difference, folks, I don't know what is. I love the A-B of that, because it's like, oh my God, the snare drum was cool. Now it's like came alive. I don't know. It's very, very cool to me. It's very cool to me, actually. So yeah, that's my hallway trick. And I don't always do. I haven't just my notes went off again. If again, we'll go off the roads real quick if those aren't up. Type in my password code here. There we go. I didn't just start doing that since I moved in Barefoot. I've actually done hallway mics like that on snares and kicks and stuff like that for as long as I can remember. Pretty much every studio somewhere is going to have a hallway close enough that you can shoot microphones. I mean, that you can shoot sound down it and put up some microphones. A couple of times I've done it where I've actually there's a speaker in the A room that you can route so that it's where you can route sound from the control room through that speaker into the live room, where I've actually put up microphones in the A live room and recorded, just the snare in the A live room with 2 microphones in the room. So it kind of sounds like the A room, I didn't do that here, even though I was missing some of the A room stuff, probably because it was booked and I just couldn't. Otherwise I probably would have. This would have said S A room instead. So yeah, but I've done this. I've done this for years. It's kind of a trick of mine. So take it with you. Make your music babies. I hope that you do that as well. And you were like, oh, I'm going to lift that trick from Mike. I'm going to find a hallway and shoot some sound down it and record it. It'll work. Trust me. It's tight. Also, it doesn't have to be at the studio. I mean, at that point, you can set up monitors anywhere and just record a hallway that you like. Okay. The last thing on this snare drum track is snare verb 1. This is, I have an Eventide Eclipse processor down to my right over here. One of my favorite effects units. It's basically an updated H3000. It's a 1-rack version, a newer make of it, because the H3000s and the H3500s, though they are my favorite, don't get me wrong, I still like those the best. They have a lot of the same algorithms on the Eclipse that they do on the 3000s, except it's a 96 kilohertz unit, a 24-bit. So it's just a better sounding H3000. Like the chipboard on it just sounds better. Having said that, actually sometimes I kind of miss the H3000 and 3500 that they actually sound objectively a little bit worse. I kind of miss that sometimes. Having said that, there's a setting on here that is it's called Big Plate 1 and Big Plate 2 that I like quite a bit when I do this hallway thing. They just kind of blend nicely, I've found over the years. I've kind of found that. So I recorded it down. Like, listen to this. Pretty standard plate. That's cool. But then what did I do EQ-wise here? I just cut it at 150. I don't want the reverb to have a bunch of low end in it where we get this low end billowy buildup. As a matter of fact, I do that on, pretty much all my reverbs, because I don't really put reverb on, at least in this mix, but typically I don't, I haven't put reverb on a bass for a long time. Not saying you shouldn't, I just personally haven't for a while. But generally, like a vocal reverb, I don't want a bunch of low end in. A snare reverb, I don't want a bunch of low end in. Even toms, even those who have low end in, I'll still cut it like 80 or something like that, where I don't need a bunch of that, like the low garbage reverby stuff. It gets swimmy and blurry really quickly. So I typically just cut out. I usually just high pass my reverbs pretty aggressively. Especially since I print a lot of my reverbs, but even in the box, I'll put an EQ after like an auxiliary track and just cut it, do a high pass there. Now the other thing I did here was a little trick of mine too. I don't know if you guys use the Sound Toys suite, but if you don't, you probably should, because they're dope, and it's like $500 for a whole drawer full of fun stuff. And one of my favorite ones is called the Decapitator. I love it. It's a distortion module. It sounds sick. Most people, I bet, watching this are at least familiar with this unit, because it's become one of their more popular units. Maybe because the name is just so dope and killer, you kind of be like, the Decapitator. How do you not open that up and just be excited about using it? I know I am. But I decapitate the reverb to make it more exciting in rock and roll. Distort the reverb, baby. Why not? Distort everything. who cares? Screw it, you know? There's no rules. And if there are, then break them. It's kind of my 2 cents. So let's listen to this reverb with the decapitator on there. I'm going to play it with and without now. Now, I do kind of hate that there's a big volume jump on those two, only because it makes the decapitated version just instantly feel better because it's louder. But I hope that you're able to also intake some of the actual tonal quality that I'm kind of dialing in there, because it's pretty killer. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's more rock and roll. It's the room it's in now. The verb is distorted and it's just got much more aggression to it. The other way it felt kind of it's just like, this is a good reverb. I mean, it's detailed. It sounds good, but it's safe sounding. You know, it's safe. It doesn't feel like a rock and roll reverb to me. It sounds like a good neutral reverb. Now this, that sounds like, to me, like a rock and roll reverb. That's another trick I do. I do that. Actually, I distort my reverbs on drums quite a bit. And then you can see here I've actually lopped out a bunch of the low end too, because this thing will also add low end back into it, even though I'm high passing here. You'd be surprised again how much is still there, especially when you start amplifying the signal like this, because that's what this is. It's a bass and amplification unit. It's there. Trust me, it's there. The other thing, I put these waveforms up high because I also want to make note that when I have these two different spatial qualities going on, one being the hallway recorder and one being this in the this one being the printed reverb from my Eclipse box. I have a tendency to try and move these in phase. This one, I mean, it's not out. I mean, its attack is in. I mean, maybe if I move it like that. Yeah, sure. But anyway, you can see here, as nerdy as it is, I actually put, even though they're later, so the phase is, we're talking a little bit more loose terms phase now, because it's like, you know, it's not actually in phase because it's happening later than the initial attack, but I have the hallway, I move the hallway so that it is in phase where it's going downward trend at the same time, and then this same guy downward trend at the same time as this. They're all staggered, but nonetheless, we have the attack and the release of the spatial samples or the spatial elements are still in phase with a part of the waveform that it's happening at, right? So in other words, the hallway's attack is happening later than the attack of the snare drum, but it's still in phase with the part of the snare drum that it's happening at. And it does make a difference. It does. It does, especially for a snare drum like this, where there's so much thumpy low end. Right? It's not a paper-thin snare drum. It's purposely thumpy. It's got a lot of sauce to it. I don't want to lose that anywhere in the process. I don't want to lose that on the reverb. I don't want to lose that on the hallway. I don't lose that anywhere. I want that thump. Give me that thump. Okay, so let's play this now with the hallway and the reverb attached to it, the distorted reverb. Pretty sick. And now imagine, again, it sounds like that now, then it's going to go through stages of compression, right? And all of a sudden, reverbs, for sure, as you compress, get bigger and bigger and bigger and deeper and wider and all that fun stuff. So, again, we'll listen to the drum print in a second. You can kind of hear how that reverb really settled into the mix. Real quick, I want to play the kick drums as well together. So this is just the direct kick and direct snare mics. You see how they're working together? You know? Like they're staying out of each other's way. That's really important. Like really important. They each have their hold cut. They're playing, so when one hits the other one, I mean, obviously they're not, in this instance, they're not hitting on top of each other, but nonetheless, they're happening together, right? There's a hole cut out for each of them. It's focused. The other thing too, actually with the snare thing too, verb, I want to go back to this real quick. I'm timing this. I tap in the tempo on my Eclipse to the reverb so that you can hear, I'll turn the hallway off for a second so you can hear just the snare Eclipse reverb and this snare itself. Do you hear how that reverb is cutting off at the next hit? That's time-based processing, right? So that if that snare just keeps going, if it was another half second longer or a second longer, it would just keep kind of rolling on itself and rolling on itself and rolling on itself. And what happens is as it gets compressed, it just becomes this monstrosity of just cloudiness and blurriness, and the attack of the snare is all over the place, and it's just, so make the mistake all the time. I'm not saying that you can't have a reverb that's longer than the hits. I'm just saying that even if it is, time it out, so if you want it to be bigger, then time it out to be 2 hits length, so it still fades out in time to the song, right? So again, we're getting this dance happening. Needles should be always pushing and pulling together on drums. Needles, even the reverb as it goes up and down, it should generally look like the tempo. If things look like the tempo as you're processing them, I know it's a silly thing to say, look like a tempo. What the hell is that, Mike? You sound crazy, dude. I'm going to turn this channel. But seriously, if it looks like the tempo, if it looks like the click track, then probably things are feeling pretty good, even if the reverb, like that, right? On the VU meter. It's just something, it's not a rule of thumb, but it's something that I just pay attention to. You know, that's all I'm saying. If things are happening in motion with the tempo, then typically compression and the set is moving together, and that in general is just a good thing. Yeah. So anyway, take note of that. Tap in your reverbs so that they're as long as you want them to be in tempo to the song. Like I said, even if that's 2 hits long or 3 hits long, I opted in this case for it being 1 hit long, so it really gets out of each other's way, which I think helps because it's not on top of the kick drum. Again, having everything have its own place, right? When I played just the kick and snare, everything had its place. It's really important. It all makes a big difference. Okay. I think that's all for today. Let's take a listen to the track real fast here. To the drum track. So this is now at the beginning of the episode, which was an hour and some change ago. We played this phono drum stems, right? The prints that went through the SSL, through the API 2500, and through the Unfair Child. And it sounded dope. I thought so anyway. I'm a fan of how they sounded. And now we went through every little thing, right? We went through the microphones, we went through the preamps, we went through the placements, we went through the EQs on each of them, we went through the samples and how I use those to amplify what I was doing on the microphones. I went through some little tricky things I did with the recording it through the hallway. I went through how I did it through the Eclipse and the distortion module used on that, the time-based effect on that. It all, again, not a short thing. It took a while for sure, but who cares, right? That's the fun of it. And then we ended up with this. Let me make sure that everything is, let's see. Yeah, and then we end up with this. Y'all knew I was going to play the second verse. You knew. I mean, if you didn't know this time, I did it at the beginning of the episode too. You knew I was going to play it through the second verse. But it's cool. So now that we've dissected it all, I I can hear, oh, there's the M201 and the low end M201. Oh, and there's the C42 and there's the top end Sizzle. Oh, there's the bottom mic. We're getting a little bit of that sizzly stuff from the kick drum and the snare. And oh, there's the Marco Cano sample. It's adding in just a slight amount of low end attack. And oh, there's the room attack sample. We're getting that splashy top end that's like fun and exciting. Oh, there's the room low that's adding the big billowy goo goo sound at the bottom. That's like almost unrealistic, even though it is a real snare. It's almost unrealistic because it wasn't played in the set. Oh, there's the hallway. That's what that is. That's the hallway. Oh, that's cool. Oh, there's a snare reverb and how it's cutting off with the tempo and how it's all distorty and fun. Like, oh, I hope that you rewind this and you listen to that and you close your eyes and you listen and oh, there it is. There's that. Really identify each part because all of these choices were made consciously, intentionally, and it took time to do so, right? I wanted to make a nice music snare baby. That's all. And you know what I'm going to say? Thank you all for watching. Again, y'all are the best. And go and take this information forward into the world and make beautiful snare babies with it. Make beautiful music babies with it. Because that's what this channel is about. I hope the next snare drum you record is better than the last one. And then that one's better than the next one, and so on and so forth. And that these tips, tricks, techniques, concepts are all being used in the real world. You know, that's why I'm doing this. I want you guys to hopefully benefit from it. Let me know any questions you have, you know, about kicks and snares and how they sit, or a drum mix, or anything you want me to go over that maybe I missed here or that you want me to cover. I want to hear about it. But in general, go and make beautiful music babies. Enjoy yourself. Have fun. Mic up hallways. Distort reverbs. Do snare samples with wallets on them that sound insane and blend them in. Just have fun and then use them in the real world. And it's almost like nothing is as gratifying as that. So, you guys have a great night, a great evening, a great day. Go forth. Goodbye.